What is this thing that I've been linked? What is this? What is this thing? Holy, Trump's just publicly confirmed the US State Department was behind the Maidan uprising in Ukraine. Wow. Oh my goodness, Jack Posobiec. I'm sure that he is about to provide evidence of this. I'm sure he's about to provide, like, here's the document I was given that shows Victoria Nuland like sent CIA agents to do that, sent CIA. I'm sure he's going to provide evidence, and this isn't you just taking a compulsive liar who has lied about everything under the sun, including about the path of a hurricane. Remember that Sharpie Gate when he expanded the range of the hurricane with the Sharpie? I don't know if you guys remember this. Sharpie Gate. In order to not be wrong. Like, this is the guy you're going to take on his... Look at that. There it is. You see it? He expanded it to include Alabama because he said it was going to hit Alabama. And he had to expand it with a Sharpie because he couldn't accept the fact that he was wrong. This is the guy you're going to take on his word when he says something with zero evidence that has been disputed by basically every expert in the field who has studied the history of Euromaidan from not a perspective of serving of state interest, but from just a historical perspective. There's just no evidence to back up that we orchestrated it. We were telling Euromaidan protesters to accept the deal. To accept the deal of the Yanukovych regime. People talk about the Victoria Nuland phone call. Listen to it. Go listen to the Victoria Nuland phone call. In that phone call, she specifically says that they think the protesters should accept the deal. Then the protesters do the exact opposite of what Victoria Nuland, who is deeply involved with the American security establishment, deeply involved with the American foreign policy establishment during the Obama administration, doesn't take that advice, does the exact opposite, continues to protest, rejects negotiations, which eventually causes Yanukovych to flee, and then more elections to be held, which eventually results in the election of Petro Poroshenko. They took the exact opposite approach than what the Americans wanted them to. If it was controlled by the United States, if we're removing all the autonomy from them, then why did they do something different than what the American advisors said they should do? Just doesn't make any sense to me. Not to mention, is it really that hard to imagine that Ukrainians saw Yanukovych cave on his promise to make a deal with the European Union when it comes to visa-free travel, the promise he made on the 2012 Ukrainian campaign trail that helped lead him to victory, that he goes back on that promise after Russia puts his nation under economic coercion, stopping trade, 25% of the trade Ukraine was making. He 180s on the position in the middle of the night, announces it in the middle of the night, which really pissed people off that he did it in the middle of the night while everybody was supposed to be asleep. Says he's going to be joining the Russian Economic Union. People go out and protest. He then hires literal gangsters, literal fucking gangsters, Tatushki thugs, and sends out the Berkut Special Forces, a police riot control unit, which has been involved in torture, racketeering, and a whole host of other issues to go brutalize and murder people. That expands the protest to include the Euromaidan and a lot more, before eventually Yanukovych had to flee the country due to his own mistakes. Is it really that difficult to imagine that Ukrainians saw that 180 on a promise that he did, combined with him caving to economic coercion on this issue that was very popular with the majority of Ukrainians? The majority of Ukrainians wanted this economic deal with the European Union. They go out and protest it. And then in response, Yanukovych doesn't only beat them and murder them, have Berkut Special Forces beat them with metal poles, tie nails, screws, and bolts to flash grenades before throwing it in the crowd, stab people, shoot people. Not only all of that, but then he tries to basically outlaw protesting, and you're really surprised that Ukrainians were angry enough to do what they did during the Revolution of Dignity. Is it really that hard to believe? Or is it the idea that a foreigner in a foreign country could protest on their own will, of their own autonomy, just too hard to believe? It's not America-centric enough of a worldview for you. My goodness, man. Okay, let's listen to it. Let's listen to the supposed truth. Let's listen to the supposed proof. Let's see what he's going to say. Because look at this. It's got 3.4 million views, 57,400 likes. Let's listen to it.
World War III has never been closer than it is right now.
Oh my God, dude. I can't. Really? Never? It's never been closer. Are you familiar with the Cuban Missile Crisis? When American planners were literally talking about, okay, so we strike here, here, and here. Here's where we're going to nuke. Sir, should we use the nukes? There were people in the Kennedy administration literally saying, nuke them, nuke them, nuke them. Are we saying Anthony Blinken's doing that right now? He's whispering in Biden's ear, sir, we should nuke the Russians. That's not happening. It's not happening. It's not even close. America hasn't upped its nuclear readiness level at all. At all. It's not to say that there's no risk that comes with it. Anytime there's a geopolitical conflict between great powers in any capacity that have nukes, there is a risk of that happening, right? But I would say that if we look at the amount of conflicts that have happened like this in the past, we're not that close. In fact, Afghanistan is just one example where we sent weapons to the Mujahideen for 10 years that eventually led to the Soviets losing, leaving Afghanistan, and the Soviet Union collapsing. That didn't cause a nuclear war. What about Vietnam? You don't think the Soviets supported the Viet Cong? Oh my God, they did, along with the Chinese. Did that mean we nuked the Vietnamese, that we nuked them in China, that we nuked the Soviets? No, it didn't. It didn't lead to that. What about Korea? What about any of these other wars and conflicts? All I'm saying is saying that right now is the closest is I think a little diluted.
We need to clean house of all of the warmongers and America last globalists. And
to be clear, though, like just when he says warmongers, Trump increased drone strikes during administrations by a rate of 200 to 300%. Just throwing that out there. Does nobody remember the Soleimani assassination? Okay, continuing. He used the AUMF from early War on Terror, 2001, 2004, like that AUMF to kill Soleimani, and not even the country that the AUMF was being used to invade in the first place and to fight. Nobody. Okay, just continuing.
And the deep state, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the national security industrial complex.
Okay, so the entirety of America's foreign policy institutions. Okay.
One of the reasons I was the only president in generations who didn't start a war is that I was the only president.
He expanded multiple wars. When you bomb more, that's expanding a war. So, like, he didn't start a war, but he expanded all of the wars that we had, basically.
President who rejected the catastrophic advice of many of Washington.
Also, the withdrawal from northeastern Syria greatly expanded the war in Syria, not only by backstabbing our allies, but creating a new fronts for the Turks and the Kurds to fight on.
Washington's generals, bureaucrats, and the so-called diplomats who only know how to get us into conflict, but they don't know how to get us out.
Also, wasn't Trump floating? Trump was floating an invasion of Venezuela. Does anybody remember this? Trump repeatedly suggested Venezuela invasion, stunning top aides. Also, this is the same guy, fire and fury in relation to North Korea. He appointed John Bolton to be his national security advisor. Like, come on, man. Rex Tillerson, man, Exxon businessman, Exxon CEO. He appointed him to be his national security advisor before John Bolton. Like, he wasn't engaging with the foreign policy establishment. He wasn't with the SWAT. Like, get out of here.
For decades, we've had the very same people, such as Victoria Nuland and many others just like her, obsessed with pushing Ukraine toward NATO, not to mention the State Department support for uprisings in Ukraine. These people have been seeking confrontation for a long time.
Wait, is that it? Is that the proof that because Trump said it? Wait, is that okay? So the State Department supported uprisings. So that could mean anything. That could mean Victoria Nuland saying, "I think that the protests there are good." If that's the case, are you telling me we can't find a single statement during the Trump administration endorsing any protest anywhere? No, we can't? Like, that's unbelievably vague. Unbelievably vague. Oh my god, come on, get out of here.
Much like the case in Iraq and other parts of the world, and now...
Dylan, why are you lying so much about this? What am I lying about, Unisam? Please tell me. I'd love to hear it.
Time, much like the case in Iraq and other parts of the world, and now we're teetering on the brink of World War III. And a lot of people...
Dude, he's a con artist. And the thing is with con artists is their main job is to scare you. Before it was with, oh, the Mexicans, they're coming to rape you. They're going to grab you and they're going to rape you. Before it was that. Now it's the world will explode if you don't vote for me. What's my actual plan for solving the Ukraine war? What is? Well, I don't know, but I'll have peace day one. And the only way you could have peace day one is if his plan was literally just to cave to all of Russia's demands. That's the only way he could have peace day one, right? If he's just like right now under current conditions, that's the only way. Is he literally said, we are going to force Ukraine to give you half of their country and demilitarize and just prepared for the rest of his country to be invaded 5 years down the line. That's the only way. Now, of course, he would never say that publicly if that is his plan, but I think it's actually just more likely that he doesn't have a plan at all. The only plan he has publicly stated, which could be a joke, could not be a joke. It's hard to tell because the only thing we have to go off of is when he suggested painting Chinese flags on F-22 fighter jets, then bombing Russia, blaming it on China, causing them to fight, therefore saving Ukraine by distracting Russia, right? That's the only thing I've heard. That's even like somewhat close to him addressing what his plan would be, right? So it's hard for me to take any of this seriously until he offers his plan publicly. And if it is like, oh, and this is what Trump has used as an excuse in the past. Well, I'm saving my plan until I'm in power so nobody steals it. That would be even more demented because that means he's letting hundreds of thousands of people die because he wants to be the person to do it, not let somebody else bring peace to Ukraine, which is absolutely ridiculous.
People don't see it, but I see it.
Morally
corrupt, a bankrupt man. Derpageddon, thank you so much for the not tier 1, for the primer, being stuff for 6 months. Biden should go to Bakhmut and T-pose in the no man's land to assert dominance over Putin. You know what? It would be a first time for the president of the United States. We're going to have a Gen Z president, and eventually it's going to happen. But I don't know. I think Biden would more likely to do like an orange justice or something.
And I've been right about a lot of things. They all say Trump's been right about everything.
Do they? Is that really? Yeah, I was in the bar the other day, and the bartender, he came up and gave me, some lager. He came up and gave me some mead. It's an old Viking bar, I guess. And he said, that Trump guy, he was right about every single thing. Remember that time he said COVID would go away in the spring? He was super right about that. Remember he said that Mexico was going to build a wall and they were going to pay for it? Remember when he said we we're going to build a wall, Mexico pay for it? Totally right about that. Remember when he said he was going to get rid of our entire national debt in 4 years? Very right about that. Remember when he mixed up the Balkans with the Baltics? He was very right about that. He was right about all that. He's so right about all these things. So right. So right. Remember when he talked about how the heat was going to kill COVID? Oh, man, he was so right about that.
None of this excuses.
Come on. By the way, YouTube. Just because I know how YouTube is when it comes to that topic, I'm mocking that. As in, I think it's wrong. Okay? I can't believe I have to do this to keep my YouTube video from being demonetized, but I don't agree with it. It's wrong. Okay, debunked. Okay, thank you. Please don't take away my income. I need to feed me myself. Thank you.
In any way, the outrageous and horrible invasion of Ukraine 1 year ago, which would have never happened if I was your president.
Why wouldn't it have happened? I hear this all the time, but what would Trump have done differently to stop the invasion? Because Russia's plan was centered on winning the war quickly. They thought it was going to be a quick war. That's why they only had logistics and supplies for a few days. They thought that Ukraine was going to crumble at the unyielding force of the Russian army. That the Russian army, and this is how many people saw it during the early days, is not even an army. It's more like a force of nature, a typhoon that comes in and destroys everything in its path, like in Chechnya in 1999. And Ukraine, if it was to stand in its way, would certainly be flattened to the ground, and the Ukrainian people would never want to put up with would never resist that type of a force, but they did. And so, but if the Russians thought of themselves that way, as more of a force of nature than a military force that would come in and take over the country, then why would they think that under Trump they couldn't do the same thing. It was based on basically winning the war in 3 to 5 days. And in that time, it would be so fast that the West would not be able to mount a reaction. Just like the West had been pretty milquetoast in its reaction to Crimea being annexed in 2014. So I don't understand why that plan would change under Trump at all, because even if Trump was to respond with more force than Biden, which the people who are endorsing Trump's policy here probably don't want him to respond with more force than Biden, it would still be delayed by the fact that it takes time to ship the equipment over, and Putin would have no reason to believe that the war would be lasting more than 3 to 5 days. Obviously, they miscalculated, but I have no reason to believe that under the Trump administration, they wouldn't have made that same miscalculation. I have zero reason to believe it wouldn't have happened as well under the Trump administration. Definitely since the Russians don't want to give the Ukrainians more and more time to train their armies to prepare militarily for a possible future war. Because as we've seen, the Ukrainian military from 2014 and 2022, 2023 is very different. It's vastly improved. And the longer they wait, the more the Ukrainian military will improve if they want to invade the country. So sooner the better in their minds.
Not even a little chance. But it does mean that here in America,
not even a little chance. It's completely impossible. Just by his presence alone, he's just that much. He's just that godly. It's impossible.
America, we need to get rid of the corrupt globalist establishment that has botched every major foreign policy decision for decades.
There's not a single good isolationist. Not a single one. There's if you look throughout history and you look at all the isolationists, they all suck. Like all of them. Like if you kept their policies long term in your country, it's always disastrous. Japan, when it came to their isolationism, led to everybody else advancing past them when it came to weapons technology and all sorts of tech, which meant when an American ship went off their shores and just bombarded and just showed the firepower that they had, there was a realization of exactly how far behind they had fell. The United States, every time they tried to go into isolationism, it ended up failing, and this seems to be the case all around the world. And it is the most isolationist countries in the world that also tend to be the least prosperous as well. Like the world is globalized. We have global markets. To rant against globalization is to rant against the entirety of the global economic system. Which, if you don't want to participate in that, you're really dooming your country to neglect and a lack of prosperity.
And that includes President Biden, whose own people said he's never made a good decision when it comes to looking at other countries and looking at wars. We have to his
own administration, Biden's administration, put out a. Can I hear that again?
And that is to get rid of the corrupt globalist establishment that has botched every major foreign policy decision for decades, and that includes
every single one, but also in his administration as well, because he had John Bolton and Rex Tillerson in his administration. So Exxon boy and kill them all, bomb the Iranians, John Bolton, they're not the foreign policy establishment? Did they not? They were your boys. Did you not botch any of these decisions? All of them were okay.
President Biden, whose own people said he's never made a good decision when it comes to looking at other countries and looking at wars.
What is this even in reference to? Biden's own people have said that he's never made a single good decision when it comes to looking at foreign countries and foreign wars. Trump himself wanted to pull out of Afghanistan. Biden then pulled out of Afghanistan. They held the same position. It's a question of execution, but they held the same position. Dylan, I will pray for you sincerely. Whoever is influencing you is using you. Choose truth, my friend, and using you for their own gain. Who links you to discuss on their show? You truth, then I have no clue what you're saying. You sound, I'm going to be for real, you sound schizophrenic. I have no clue what you're saying. I have zero clue what you're saying. Get off the cock for a day, please. No, I refuse.
We have to replace them with people who support American interests. Over our 4 years in the White House, we made incredible progress.
This just sounds like a weird combination of realism and isolationism.
In putting the America Last contingent aside And
This is like MAGA Kissinger. That's all this sounds like. A weird, like the weirdest combination.
bringing the world to peace. And now we're going to complete the mission. The State Department, Pentagon, and national security establishment will be a very different place by the end of my administration. In fact,
Do you think he'll finally do that invasion of Venezuela? Because it's like in one hand, he's like, foreign war is terrible, awful. But you know, maybe invading Venezuela is a brilliant idea. Like Trump has no consistent foreign policy ideology, and I mean that's not that surprising since he went through so many different like national security advisors, and it was so chaotic to work in his administration. And I don't think he's ever really deeply thought about foreign policy.
just into my administration, it'll be a very different place, and it'll get things done, just like I did 4 years ago. We never had it so good. We'll also stop the lobbyists and the big defense contractors from going in and pushing our senior military and national security officials toward conflict only to...
Dude, do you guys remember when Trump was bragging next to the Saudis about all the weapons they were selling to Saudi Arabia? Trump, Saudi weapons sales. Let's see if I can... Where is it? Where is it? Yeah, here it is. Oh no, I don't need to hear Amy Goodman talk about it. I just want to see the clip. I just want to see the clip. This clip. Trump Saudi weapons deal press conference, maybe. Here it is.
Some of the things that have been approved and are currently under construction and will be delivered to Saudi Arabia very soon, and that's for their protection. But if you look in terms of dollars, $3 billion, $533 million, $525 million, that's peanuts for you. $880 million, $645 million, $6 billion, that's for frigates.
For frigates.
$889 million, $63 million. And that's for various artillery.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Never getting us involved in these foreign conflicts, right? There's no way that anybody, some Yemeni people could get radicalized against the United States, seeing their villages getting torn apart by American bombs. That's never happened before. What blowback? Never heard of that in a million years. What's blowback? Never heard of it.
To reward them when they retire with lucrative jobs, getting paid millions and millions of dollars. Take a look at the globalist warmonger donors backing our...
It's just like millions and millions of dollars, and he's like, look, and he's like bragging in front of, hey, look at all these weapon sales, so many jobs, oh, look at all this money. Like, come on, dude, come on.
Our opponents. That's because they're candidates of war. I am the president who delivers peace and...
Dude, I can't. Just with the drastic drone strike increases, the proposals to invade Venezuela. It's like, come on, dog.
Peace through strength. There was a reason we...
Remember the fire and fury in response to North Korea basically saying, I will leave North Korea a nuclear crater. I will wipe it off the face of the earth. But this is the same guy who's concerned about the danger of nuclear war. It's like this whole thing just sounds, dude. I feel like I'm just, there's not a single shred of honesty in the entirety of this speech, of the entirety of anything he's saying.
We had no conflict. There was a...
You know, I'm starting to think that Trump might be a slightly dishonest person.
Reason we didn't get into wars because other countries respected us. I entirely built all right from the beginning.
If you look at international polling, respect for the United States drastically went down during the Trump administration. It's like literally like boom, like between administrations. I mean, a Pew Research Center, a pretty respected pollster. If you don't believe me, you can go check it out yourself.
Rebuilt our military. It's a big reason for that. They didn't want to mess around with the United States, and now they're laughing at us. We could...
I like how every president rebuilds our military. Every president always says that. But Trump is the most adamant. As in, like, before Obama left office, he, like, pressed a big red button and, like, all the fighter jets exploded and he sunk all of our aircraft carriers and, like, twirled his, like, evil villain mustache. Like, yeah, who will defend America now? And then Trump came in with, like, and he, like, wiped the sweat off of his brow and he started getting to work. He grabbed a hammer and he started building day after day under the White House and in a little garage. He was making the missiles. He was making the artillery shells. He was a true patriot, rearming America.
End the Ukraine conflict in 24 hours with the right leadership.
Okay. Wow, that's an amazing claim, because nobody else in the world has been able to do it. Erdogan hasn't, Israel hasn't, Boris Johnson hasn't, Rishi Sunak hasn't, Biden hasn't, Olaf Scholz hasn't, Putin hasn't, Zelensky hasn't. So how will you do it? Let's hear it. How do you do it?
At the end of my next 4 years, the warmongers and frauds and failures...
Okay, he doesn't explain it at all. Big surprise, big surprise. It's like all those other things, all those other promises he's made, he never gave an explanation for on how he was going to deliver, then went into office, didn't deliver on the vast majority of them, and then never expanded on why he wasn't able to deliver on it.
The senior ranks of our government will all be gone, and we will have a new group of competent national security officials who believe in defending America's vital interests above all else. I
gotta say, man, when it comes to like the word oligarch in American like media and like how we talk about like oligarchs, like we never talk about like American businessmen being oligarchs. When I think about like the Eastern European oligarch, Trump is like his personality and like way of doing politics is probably the closest outside outside of like maybe like he doesn't have direct like ownership of some of like a lot of media companies like a lot of oligarchs try to invest in, even though he does have media that is loyal to him, you know, things like Newsmax, other publications like that. He probably in American politics is the one that acts the most like an Eastern European oligarch post-Soviet collapse. He is probably very similar to somebody like Yanukovych in character.
Thank you very much.
My goodness. Wow. What I mean, I was really looking for that proof or whatever that Jack Posobiec said, but guess what? I guess, you know, I think that Jack Posobiec might have been a little off base. Big surprise.